Peter, you were very young when you joined the Air Force. Tell us a bit about your training.
Well, I joined up, I was called up when I was 17 3/4 because I'd already volunteered and had my pilot's medical. So they called me up and I had to go to Lord's Cricket Ground where we were parcelled off into units, and I was eventually sent down to Torquay to 13 initial training wing, and there we did, I think it was 6 weeks of square bashing and Morse code and theory of flight and all that sort of thing. And then we were put in a train and sent up to where, no, we didn't know, but when we arrived there, some of the blokes with us recognised where we were. It was Liverpool. And there we were put on board an American ship, which was the SS George F. Eliot. I don't know who George F. Eliot was, but I've got a feeling he might have been one of the signatories of the Declaration of Independence, because a lot of those were Georges. And anyway, it was a Liberty ship, and we were then 14 days on that ship, sleeping in our clothes, and I personally was in right up at the sharp end in a cabin which was narrow at one end and wide at the other. That shows how close to the front we were. And it was typical American. We hadn't seen ice cream since the beginning of the war, but of course we had ice cream with practically every meal. It was really American. We then, after 14 days, because it was a slow convoy, and it was in February, so it wasn't really very smooth, luckily, because if it had been smooth, we might have got torpedoed. But it was very rough weather. We landed in New York, and there we had a demonstration of bureaucracy at its height. We were not allowed to step on American soil. So when we came down the gangway onto a long carpet that was stretched between the bottom of the gangway and a train, a Canadian train, that was drawn up on the quayside. And each side of that carpet was a line of American Marines to make sure we didn't step off onto American soil. And we marched down this carpet into the train, and the train took us straight up to Montreal. So we never actually set foot on American soil. I imagine the reason for this was to save all the enormous amount of paperwork for having each one of us emigrate to America and then be passed up to Canada. We just went straight to Canada. And when we got to Canada, we were put in barracks at Lachine, and the next morning, we arrived there at early hours in the morning, put straight into bunks and told to go to sleep, and we'd be got up in the morning. Next morning they didn't wake us too early, and we were out on parade at about 9 o'clock, and a Canadian Warrant Officer 2. They hadn't got any of that Warrant Officer 2s in the RAF, but Canadian Air Force did have WO2s who had a crown on the sleeve instead of the coat of arms, and they were with WO2s. And he looked at us all and said, "You're a scruffy lot. Is anybody here from Dumbartonshire?" And there wasn't anybody, so he then said, "Right, dismissed, go and change into the new uniforms which will be provided. And we had to take our uniforms off, strip off completely. We were given completely new clothes, khaki uniforms with Canadian buttons and Canadian shoulder flashes. And we packed up our uniforms and parcelled them up. We assumed we wouldn't see them again, but lo and behold, 2 days later, they were all back, cleaned, pressed and ready to wear again. And in the meantime, we were also issued with the Canadian uniforms, which were better in the summer because they were lighter. So that's the beginning of our time in Canada.
Thanks, Peter.